sunny spells, but it will feel cold in the wind, and it'll be a noticeably colder day than of late across the Midlands. It'll be mostly dry, plenty of sunny spells, the odd shower possible in the north later. The strong northerly or northwesterly winds will add to the cold feel across the northeast of England. It will be mostly dry here with sunny spells. Isolated showers are possible in the west. It's going to be bitterly cold today across the whole of Scotland with gale-force northerly winds. There'll be sunny spells and scattered wintry showers, bringing blizzard conditions at times. Northern Ireland will be cold and windy. There'll also be sunny spells and scattered wintry showers with the snow mainly over the hills here, feeling very cold in the wind. And it will remain cold for all this afternoon, especially in that wind. Wintry showers extend into North Wales. And that's how the weather is shaping up for you this Tuesday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Tuesday morning. I'm Tom Harwood and this is the briefing on GB News TV and now on your radio too. This morning we'll look at Keir Starmer's big speech in Birmingham today, whether Boris is starting to turn things around in the polls, a petition trying to block Sir Tony Blair's knighthood has passed 500,000 signatures, and we'll explore an interesting proposal to help fix the housing crisis. All that's coming up after your news.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. These are your headlines. At least 6 hospital trusts have declared critical incidents as Omicron cases threaten staff shortages. The Prime Minister says it's essential to look after the NHS, but some health leaders warn they're in a state of crisis. One of those was United Lincolnshire Hospital NHS Trust, who say extreme and unprecedented staff absences were expected to result in compromised care. The number of migrants attempting to cross the Channel to the UK trebled last year compared to the year before. More than 28,000 people tried to make the dangerous journey in small boats. Last year, there was also a record 1,185 illegal crossings in a single day. Ministers are being warned that the current policy to prevent the crossings isn't working. A US judge is going to rule on whether a civil sex lawsuit can be brought against the Duke of York. Virginia Giuffre is suing Prince Andrew for alleged sexual assault when she was a teenager. The Duke's legal team deny the allegations and they'll attempt to dismiss the case at a hearing today. Yesterday, a document was made public revealing the terms of a $500,000 payout from convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein to Miss Giuffre, which prevented her from speaking publicly. The founder of a blood testing business has been convicted of fraud. The company, Theranos, had been valued at $9 billion after claiming they had revolutionary finger prick blood testing technology that never actually worked. Billionaire Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 2 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud and could face 20 years in jail. You're up to date. I'll have more headlines for you in half an hour. Right now, Tom and the briefing.
Good morning and welcome to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on GB News TV and now Radio 2 on DAB+. Sir Keir Starmer is in Birmingham this morning, where he will attempt to stop his poll lead drifting away after a surprisingly successful end to the year. He's going to go after Boris directly, casting him as a fundamentally unserious politician who behaves as if politics is a branch of the entertainment industry, in his words. Labour, of course, lucked out in November and December, climbing ahead due to a series of unforced errors from number 10. For his part, Boris Johnson has tidied up his act this week, at least superficially, with a new haircut. A poll out yesterday evening too showed hope for the Prime Minister, seeing his approval rating begin to bounce back up from a low of -30 to -18, a gain of 11 points. This same poll showed that now just under half the country disapprove of the Prime Minister, down to 49%, a drop of 6 points. Well, let's discuss all of this now with Chris Curtis, the head of political polling at Opinium. Welcome to the programme, Chris. Now, 49% of the country disapproving of the Prime Minister is still quite a high number. Is it enough that Boris could still win an election on it?
On the poll that came out yesterday, probably not. Look, what we saw from the polling before Christmas was pretty abysmal for the Prime Minister and for the Conservative Party more generally. It would almost certainly mean on those numbers that Boris was kicked out of Downing Street. It was the worst approval ratings we've ever seen for him. It was the kind of approval ratings that we've never really, bar one very, very strange occasion, seen a Prime Minister bounce back from before. So I think we're talking a little bit about, is he bouncing back slightly? Is he improving slightly? I think he probably is. We've only seen one poll so far, but to be honest with you, after the pretty abysmal polling for the Prime Minister before Christmas, it couldn't get much worse.
Interesting looking at this bounce back, because obviously it's still pretty low. It's lower than he's been for a long time, but it's trending in the right direction. And I wonder how much of this may well be due to that decision to not follow Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland into holding those restrictions. We know that Boris has always been unpopular with a certain section of the electorate. There's a certain section of the electorate that has never held him in high esteem. But what appeared to happen, and correct me if I'm wrong, what appeared to happen at the end of last year was those people who had previously liked Boris Johnson, those maybe Tory-leaning people, started to dislike him. Is his way back to popularity to win back those Tories?
Oh, yes, undoubtedly. Boris needs to kind of rebuild and hold together that coalition that supported him in 2019. I think there's probably 2 reasons why maybe there's been a bit of a bounce back. The first, as you say, is there is a bit of a perception at the moment that he made the right rules on lockdown. That might hold for the next few weeks, which could aid some sort of comeback. But the second and probably more important aspect of this is that we've now had a few weeks over Christmas where the front pages haven't been dominated by negative headlines about the Prime Minister and the government and scandals, whereas the sort of month before that, every news story had been along that theme. So I think that sort of shift has meant that everything's calmed down. We've seen a bit of a reversion back to the mean. And, Boris Johnson's approval ratings have just gone from very bad to bad. The Conservative lead in the poll has also the Labour lead in the poll has also shrunk slightly as well in this one poll we've seen of the new year so far.
Is this the danger for Keir Starmer? Keir Starmer, of course, speaking in Birmingham today, trying to keep that momentum up for his party. Is the problem here that it was never really generated by the Labour Party in the first place? The unpopularity of the Conservative Party was due to these unforced errors over Owen Paterson, over lockdown parties, over cheese and wine, and that big rebellion over Plan B. None of these were instigated by the Labour Party. We've heard all these memes about how the real leader of the opposition has been the political editor of the Daily Mirror or Marcus Rashford or just about anyone other than Keir Starmer. What can Keir do today to try and keep his momentum up?
Yes, I mean, look, the drop in the Conservative poll lead is almost certainly driven more by the Conservatives than it is by the Labour Party. We know that for a few reasons. Firstly, Keir Starmer's approval rating hasn't gone up, particularly as Boris Johnson's has gone down. We also see when a lot of those voters are moving away from the Conservative Party, they're not going to the Labour Party, and they're going to sort of other parties, or more importantly, they're now saying that they're undecided about how they would vote. So for all of those reasons, it's definitely worse for the Conservative Party than it is good for Labour. Having said that, this sort of opportunity, this does give Keir Starmer the opportunity to sort of reset his leadership. It gives him a bit of space, a bit of a reprieve to go out and say things with people listening and knowing he's ahead in the polls and will be facing a lot less of that criticism that he was facing a few months ago. What he does with that extra space he's been given is a much bigger question. My view is that Labour's biggest weakness still, despite the fact that we're over a decade on from the financial crash, is that Labour are not trusted to run the economy. So I think he needs to prove to the country that he's the kind of grown-up, sensible person who will make the right decisions on the economy, who won't get the country back into loads and loads of debt again, which the public don't like, who will make the tough decisions necessary in order to keep people in their jobs, to keep cost of living down, things like that, and to build a narrative about that, particularly given the government is going to face some really, really, really difficult economic decisions over the coming months.
Yeah, I have to say this cost of living crisis, energy bills, the whole economy in general does seem to be creeping up the agenda. And Sir Keir Starmer today in his speech is leading with three buzzwords: security, prosperity, integrity. And I wonder, prosperity, how often is that spoken about in the general sense from a Labour leader? Potentially a bit more of an economic message coming from the Labour leader now too. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. But Chris Curtis, thank you very much for talking us through that bit of a bounce back in the polls for Boris Johnson there. Let's see if it can continue. Thanks, Chris, for joining us from Opinion, obviously. Now, moving on. Over 500,000 people have signed a petition to strip former Prime Minister Tony Blair of his title, a title personally bestowed by the Queen. Sir Tony, as he would now like to be known, was made a Knight Companion of the Most Noble Order of the Garter in the New Year's honours. It's the world's oldest national order of knighthood and the pinnacle of the British honours system. Well, let's talk about this petition now. Let's talk about the public reaction to this honour. I'm joined now in the studio by Andrew Pearce, journalist and consultant editor of the Daily Mail. Welcome to the programme, Andrew. This poll, was this to be expected? We know that Tony Blair is someone who divides opinion.
Yeah. Look, this is the oldest order of chivalry in the unwritten British Constitution, and if he had any chivalry about him, he'd have said to Her Majesty, thank you very much, but I'm not accepting it, because she has been caught in the flack, because it is a deeply, deeply unpopular honour which she's decided to give to him. She's drawing to the end of her reign. We know that. He was Prime Minister 14 years ago. He did some good things. I'm the first to admit it. He brought a peace in Northern Ireland, independence of the Bank of England, but I'm afraid the whole rocks of his premiership are stranded on the Iraq War. It was an illegal war, in my view. 179 British service personnel died in that war. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed, civilians. The whole Middle East instability is as a result of that war. And let's not forget, Tom, what the Chilcot report said into that war. That was 2.6 million words. I didn't read all of them, but I read again the summary by Sir John Chilcot, and it said that Tony Blair had not exhausted the options for peace before he went into war with George Bush. He also said he'd exaggerated the case that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. We also know about the death of Dr. David Kelly, the unfortunate weapons inspector, who was the source of a BBC briefing where he said the dossier which Blair had used to persuade the Commons to vote for war had been sexed up. These are huge scars, I'm afraid, on Blair's premiership. And let's not also forget, just a few weeks ago, we had the madness of the flight from Kabul. We withdrew our last remaining British personnel there. What do you think the families make, Tom, of the 474 people who died in Afghanistan? Do they not think that whole war was in vain? The Taliban are now back in charge, so did their loved ones lose their lives in vain? And let's not forget, too, hundreds more suffering life-saving injuries. That's why I'm afraid Tony Blair should not be given a knighthood.
I think that you make a very compelling point about the folly of the Iraq War, indeed how it diverted crucial resources away from Afghanistan. Perhaps that would have been a greater success if we hadn't gone into Iraq. However, there are lots of other people who've made mistakes in their time who have ascended to become a Knight of the Garter. And, of course, Tony Blair was Prime Minister for a decade, longer than just about most of his compatriots. And if we look at some of the other Prime Ministers who've received this honour, John Major, not considered to be sort of the most successful Prime Minister in the world. Margaret Thatcher, of course, someone who divided...
The best Prime Minister.
I might agree with you there, but certainly there'd be lots of people, if there had been an e-petition site in the 1990s, perhaps she would have had 500,000
But she didn't get a knighthood.
Too.
She didn't get a knighthood or a damehood. She went into the House of Lords.
She got exactly the same honour, this companion of the Garter.
Yeah, she did.
Callaghan, Heath, Wilson, Eden, Attlee, Churchill, Baldwin, Asquith, Balfour. It seems to be pretty regular.
But none of
ministers
I agree. The exception in there is Harold Macmillan, an old Etonian who rejected it twice. And Blair, of course, was the great moderniser. Blair was the one who wanted to reform the House of Lords completely, get rid of all the hereditary principles, and yet he takes one of the most old-fashioned honours of them all. It doesn't sit with his modernising stance, does it? But the difference is with all those Prime Ministers, Tom, none of them took us into that war where we think the House of Commons was misled, that Privy Councillors were misled. And, of course, we saw in the Chilcot report the letter he wrote to George Bush in the summer of 2002, "I'm with you all the way, Mr President." He'd made his mind up even before the case had been properly argued. And I'm afraid the chaos in the Middle East now, the terror attacks we've had in Europe, I think all flow from that war.
Well, there's Eden, of course, who was not considered to be a very successful Prime Minister.
But he made a terrible mess
in Suez.
He did.
And, of course, Callaghan, and you had the Winter of Discontent, and arguably Attlee, of course, plunged the country into a form of socialism from which we did not recover for half a century. Yet these people all got honours.
Yeah. But I just don't think just because they did, we should then Tony Blair should too. All wrongs don't make a right. And times have changed now. I think what's been going on here, the Queen's reign is coming to an end, not too soon, we hope. I think she's probably been tidying up affairs and thinks Blair was Prime Minister for 14 years. She had a difficult relationship, we know that, with him because of, he was probably the first Prime Minister who cancelled the weekly audience. He would do it on his terms when he wanted to. But I think this has drawn her into controversy that she doesn't need at the end of her reign. 500,000 signatures today, Tom. By the end of the week, we'll be above 1 million because this is such a divisive move. And why does Blair need it? He's got millions. We didn't even talk about the millions he's made from advising dodgy despots around the world and his huge property empire. He's a fantastically rich former Prime Minister, the richest of any former Prime Ministers. Why does he need this award? He frankly doesn't. And if he had a shred of decency, he'd say, "Thank you, I thought about it. I don't need to be called Sir Tony."
Well, on that note, let's see how far that petition climbs. I have to note, the last person to be stripped of this title was Wilhelm II, of course, who instigated the First World War. Well, parents are sending their children back to school this week as Christmas holidays end. But there's a bit of uncertainty about this school term as Omicron continues its spread. With staff shortages, COVID testing and now masks in classrooms, what will school look like when the students come back? And is it likely to change? Well, earlier on Breakfast, Eamon and Isabel spoke to Labour's Shadow Minister for Education, Bridget Phillipson. They began by asking her how she felt the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zwahi, had set up schools for the new term.
Incredibly important, and they have missed so much time already, so it's really vital that they stay in class. I think what we've seen from the government, however, doesn't put in place what's needed to make sure that we keep down the transmission of COVID within schools. So, before Christmas, we were saying that the government should use that break to roll out the vaccine to all eligible children. It's been a huge missed opportunity to do that. We also need to see proper ventilation in our schools. Head teachers are being told just to open the windows and put children in coats. I don't think that's good enough. And on testing, we know that many parents have experienced difficulties getting their hands on testing kits, and it's vital that we all test our children to make sure that we're kind of keeping control of the virus.
Well, we know what's wrong, Bridget. What would you do to put it right?
Yeah, firstly, we would make sure that there was proper ventilation in every classroom, so we'd take decisive action on that. Secondly, where it comes to the vaccine, we would have made sure that over Christmas we had walk-in clinics so that all eligible children were able to get the vaccine as quickly and easily as possible. And third, we've seen a lot of misinformation around about the vaccine. It's really important that we tackle that, but also that we stop people hanging around school gates, peddling misinformation to parents and also frightening and alarming children. So that's some of the measures that we would be taking right now to get on top of things. But longer term, we need to make sure that our children see a proper recovery from the pandemic. So we've got a really ambitious, costed plan around making sure that children do have that recovery from all the time that they've missed out of class.
Tell us more about how you would deal with parents, how you would bring them on side, because we all know there's a lot of parental resistance to vaccination.
I think it's really important just to reiterate that the vaccine is safe and effective, and that obviously if we get vaccine rates to a higher level, it will make it easier to keep schools open, to keep children in class and to drive down transmission. My experience, I have to say, is that I've heard from lots of people that they want to see their children vaccinated, but actually getting an appointment hasn't always been very easy. I think we need to see more around walk-in clinics, around pop-up clinics in schools, just to make it as easy as possible for children and parents. I think access is as much of an issue as misinformation, but I just would reiterate the vaccine is safe, and it's really important that we all take it up when it's our turn.
Bridget Phillipson, there is no scientific consensus on whether or not children as young as 5 should be given the vaccine. There is agreement in the over 12s. There are some countries, many countries in the world, who are vaccinating primary school-aged children. But as I say, there's no unified consensus on that. It's very confusing for parents, and obviously they're very concerned when they're making decisions for somebody else. Where do you stand on that?
Of course, and parents want to have all the information available and in front of them. I mean, we have seen the government announce that children who have particular health conditions or those who live with those who do will be eligible for the vaccine when they're aged 5 to 11. But where it comes to children already that are eligible, so the over 12s, it's only around half who've been able to take up that vaccine. I don't think that's good enough, and I think we should really redouble our efforts on it. But where it comes to rolling out the vaccine more widely to other groups, we'll be guided by the evidence on that, and I hope the government will be putting forward what the position is in due course.
Bridget Phillipson there. Now, it's undeniable that Britain is suffering under a housing crisis. The year I was born, the average property in London cost over 3 times the average wage. Since then, despite a Great Recession and a global pandemic, it has soared to 11 times the average wage. Frankly, Britain needs more homes in the right places, but to achieve this, it needs homes that can carry community consent, that preserve the beauty of the country. Interestingly, a paper exploring some brownfield development in South Tottenham shows that this might be possible. Victorian terraced houses have been allowed to grow upwards, subject to a strict design code ensuring that extensions harmonise with the design of the existing building. We're looking at a picture of these extensions now. You'll be able to find it on the GB News social media accounts as well. Well, joining me to talk about how this is possible, how it's been received and whether it could be rolled out to the rest of the country is Ben Southwood, a Senior Fellow at Policy Exchange and Head of Research at Create Streets. Welcome to the programme, Ben. First of all, how did this come about, this incredibly localised new rule in terms of expanding housing?
So it's partly the special needs of a specific community. So there's a thriving Haredi Jewish community in South Tottenham. In the area in which this rule applies, there was an average of 5.6 children per household, and they were crammed into these small Victorian 2-storey terraced houses, sometimes with 4 children per bedroom. And the community wasn't willing to move because most people, if they have lots of kids, they probably move out to the suburbs where land is cheaper and spread out a bit. But on Shabbat, they're not able to use any other form of transport other than walking, and they're only able to walk a certain distance. And that meant that they were unwilling to move away from synagogue and the other religious community elements. So what happened is local councillors were noticing they were putting up very ugly extensions. And also these extensions weren't adding that much space, perhaps a couple bedroom here or there. And they thought, well, maybe there's a win-win solution. So we can make the extensions look better so the rest of the community is happier. But we can also give them the ability to put more space on, as the Victorians themselves might have done. And it seems like that. So over a few years, Haringey Council worked on a design code. This strict design code came into place, saying what you can and can't do. And now all the extensions go in line with the design code. They tend to be bigger, so people are being able to spread out their kids. There have been reports of fewer behavioural issues, fewer issues at school because they've got more space, each of the children, for their own room, say, or at least sharing a room with one of their nearer siblings rather than 3 others. And it seems like one way in which you can make these houses bigger, add more bedrooms, but with community consent.
Now, it's interesting looking at South Tottenham and looking at those houses. It seems that they are built very well. It seems that you wouldn't be able to tell that they weren't Victorian looking at them. How do they achieve such a strict design code and actually such good implementation of that code?
Well, it's very interesting. So most design codes around the country will say quite vague things like there needs to be design excellence or things like that. And that means there's a lot of leeway for officers to take discretion over how that should be implemented and perhaps reflect their own preferences about design rather than necessarily the preferences of the communities that they have. What's been done in this one is very, very clear rules. Lots of pictures. This is what you can do. It's completely obvious. If, for example, there's a gable, the gable has to be copied up. If there's a brick decoration, a bit of brick ornament, so different coloured brick with a pattern, that has to be copied up. If you use these materials at the bottom, they have to be the same materials at the top. And all of those things mean that you can follow it very easily. And so then you can just get a builder to come in, builder knows what to do as long as the rules are clear.
And the win-win here is incredible because, of course, these extensions can cost around $100,000 to build, but the value they add to the house is so much more than that.
Yeah, so in some areas, obviously, in London, as you pointed out, there's a very specific circumstance for the UK. The shortage of housing is much tighter and South Tottenham is expensive even for London. So it's understandable here that if you give people the ability to add more to their property, it'd be worth a lot. That won't work everywhere, and this policy wouldn't work everywhere. I mean, for one thing, it's mostly designed for Victorian and Edwardian houses. You need a different policy for modern houses, and you need a different policy for older medieval or Georgian houses. But yeah, in this area, it's been able to add, I reckon, I did an estimate of how many bedrooms it's added, I reckon about 1,000, and this is a neighbourhood of only 8 to 10 streets, really. It's a pocket neighbourhood. And there's about 20% of the houses have done it so far since the policy's been in place.
Now, for our viewers on television, we can have a look at some of this design code that has been implemented in this street, and you can see this on social media if you're listening on the radio. Uniquely in this design code, it shows what you shouldn't do. It shows bad examples of ugly buildings that should be avoided. Is this something that could be replicated across the country?
I think pretty much all Victorian neighbourhoods could do something like this. Some of the very special ones with particularly exquisite architecture, maybe they want to take a longer time to work out, do we need to do this, blah, blah, blah. But in areas where land is expensive, housing is tight, and we don't want to just demolish the houses to make them bigger, we want community consent for smaller scale upgrades that benefit the people who are already living there, the existing residents. I think this is a good solution.
And what do you think are the prospects of this being rolled out? Is there any sort of leaning towards this in government?
I know that the government is looking for ways to do this kind of improvement. When Michael Gove was previously housing spokesperson in the 2000s, he said stuff like, we need to have carrots rather than sticks. We need to let people do more with their property rather than, wholesale gigantic developments without the consent of locals. And he retweeted my tweet on this paper, so hopefully that means he's interested.
Well, there we go. The Housing Secretary seeming to endorse that. Ben Salford, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm afraid that's it for the programme. Coming up, it's To The Point, and I'll be covering for Patrick Christie's with Mercy Maroki. But first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking cold with snow showers and gales in the north. Early rain will clear the south. Let's take a look at the details. Well, the southwest of England will be windy and noticeably colder than of late. There'll be blustery showers in the west, but remain dry with sunny spells in the east. The southeast will have a band of rain with a little hill snow possible. This will slowly clear southeastwards with brisk northerly winds following. Wales will be cold with blustery showers in the west. Elsewhere, it will be dry with sunny spells, but it will feel cold in the wind. And it'll be a noticeably colder day than of late across the Midlands. It'll be mostly dry, plenty of sunny spells, the odd shower possible in the north later. The strong northerly or northwesterly winds will add to the cold feel across the northeast of England. It will be mostly dry here with sunny spells. Isolated showers are possible in the west. It's going to be bitterly cold today across the whole of Scotland with gale-force northerly winds. There'll be sunny spells and scattered wintry showers, bringing blizzard conditions at times. Northern Ireland will be cold and windy. There'll also be sunny spells and scattered wintry showers with the snow mainly over the hills here, feeling very cold in the wind. And it will remain cold for all this afternoon, especially in that wind. Wintry showers extend into North Wales. And that's how the weather is shaping up for you this Tuesday.